Namaskar students. Hope you are hale and hearty, taking care of your health and your studies. You were waiting for this video, I know that. So here we are with a new video. Today we are going to do chapter number 1 from your history book. I know when I say history, there is a chronology of events which it bears. But you should not be bothered. You should have no fears, because today we are going to do chapter number 1 from your history book. If the context in which information is produced changes with time, what about language and meanings? Historical records exist in a variety of languages which have changed considerably over the years. Medieval Persian, for example, is different from modern Persian. The difference is not just with regard to grammar and vocabulary, the meaning of words also change over time. Take the term Hindustan, for example. Today we understand it as India, the modern nation state. When the term was used in 13th century by Minhaj-e-Siraj, a chronicler who wrote in Persian, he meant the areas of Punjab, Haryana and the lands between the Ganga and the Yamuna. He used the term in a political sense for lands that were a part of dominions of the Delhi Sultan. The areas included in this term shifted with the extent of the Sultanate, but the term never included South India. By contrast, in the early 16th century, Babur used Hindustan to describe the geography, the fauna and the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. As we will see later in the chapter, this was somewhat similar to the way the 14th century poet Amir Khusro used the term Hind. While the idea of a geographical and cultural entity like India did exist, the term Hindustan did not carry the political and national meaning which we associate with it today. Historians today have to be careful about the terms they use because they meant different things in the past. Take for example a simple term like foreigner. It is used today to mean someone who is not an Indian. The medieval period of a foreigner was any stranger who appeared, say, in a given village, someone who was not a part of that society or culture. In Hindi, the term Pardesi might be used to describe such a person, and in Persian, Ajnabi. A city dweller, therefore, might have regarded a forest dweller as a foreigner, but two peasants living in the same village were not foreigners to each other, even though they may have had different religious or caste backgrounds. Historians and their sources. Historians use different types of sources to learn about the past depending upon the period of their study and the nature of their investigation. Last year, for example, you read about rulers of Gupta dynasty and Harshvardhan. In this book, we will read about the following 1000 years from roughly 700 to 1750 AD. You will notice some continuity in the sources used by the historians for the study of this period. They still rely on coins, inscriptions, architecture, and textual records for information. The number and variety of textual records increased dramatically during this period. They slowly displaced other types of available information. Through this period, paper gradually became cheaper and more widely available. People used it to write holy texts, chronicles of rulers, letters, and teachings of saints, petitions and judicial records, and for registers of accounts and taxes. Manuscripts were collected by wealthy people, rulers, monasteries, and temples. They were placed in libraries and archives. These manuscripts and documents provide a lot of detailed information to historians, but they are also difficult to use. There was no printing press in those days, so scribes copied manuscripts by hand. If you have ever copied a friend's homework, you would know that this is not a simple exercise. Sometimes you cannot read your friend's handwriting and you are forced to guess what is written. As a result, there are small but significant differences in your copy of your friend's work. Manuscripts copying is somewhat similar. This is a serious problem because we rarely find the original manuscript of the author today. We are totally dependent upon the republished copies made by later scribes. As a result, historians have to read different manuscripts versions of the same. Let's talk about new social and political groups. The study of the 1,000 years between 700 and 1750 AD is a huge challenge to historians, largely because of the scale and variety of developments that occurred over the period. At different moments in this period, new technologies made their appearance, like the Persian wheel in irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, and firearms in combat. New foods and beverages arrived in the subcontinent: potatoes, corn, chilies, tea, and coffee. Remember that all these innovations, new technologies, and crops came along with people who brought other ideas with them as well. As a result, this was a period of economic, political, social, and cultural change. This was also a period of great mobility. Groups of people traveled long distances in search of opportunity. The subcontinent held immense wealth and the possibilities for people to carve a fortune. One group of people who became important in this period were the Rajputs, a name derived from Rajputra, the son of a ruler. Between the 8th and 14th centuries, the term was applied more generally to a group of warriors. When the Mughal Empire declined in 18th century, it led to re-emergence of regional states. Not just rulers and chieftains, but also soldiers and commanders who served in the armies of different monarchs all over the subcontinent. a chivalric code of conduct, extreme valor, and a great sense of loyalty were the qualities attributed to Rajputs by their poets and bards. Other groups of peoples, such as the Marathas, Sikh, Jats, Ahoms, and Kayast, also used the opportunities of the age to become politically important. Throughout this period, there was a gradual cleaning of forest and the extension of agriculture, a change faster and more complete in some areas than in others. Changes in their habitat forced many forest dwellers' habitat to migrate. Others started tilling the land and became peasants. These new peasant groups gradually began to be influenced by regional markets, chieftains, priests, monasteries, and temples. They became part of large complex societies and were required to pay taxes and offer goods and services to local lords. As a result, significant economic and social differences emerged among peasants. Some possessed more productive land and others also kept cattle. And some combined artisanal work with agricultural activity during the lean season. As society became more differentiated, people were grouped into jatis or subcastes and ranked on the basis of their backgrounds and their occupations. Ranks were not fixed permanently and varied according to the power, influence, and resources controlled by the members of the jati. The status of the same jati could vary from area to area. Jatis framed their own rules and regulations to manage the conduct of their members. These regulations were enforced by an assembly of elders, described in some areas as the Jati Panchayat. But Jatis were also required to follow the rules of their village. Several villages were governed by chieftains. Together, they were only one small unit of a state. Large states like those of Cholas, Tughlaq, or Mughal encompassed many regions. A Sanskrit Prashasti praising the Delhi Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban explained that he was a ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Bengal, the Gauda region in the east, to Ghazni, the Gajjan in Afghanistan in the west, and included all of the South India, Dravida. People of different regions, Gauda, Andhra, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Gujarat, apparently fled before his armies. Historians regard these as exaggerated claims of conquest. At the same time, they try to understand why rulers kept claiming to have control over different parts of the subcontinent. As scribe copied manuscripts, they also introduced small changes, a word here, a sentence there. These small differences grew over centuries of copying until manuscripts of the same text became substantially different from one another. With the legacies of the big and small states that had ruled over them. This was apparent in the emergence of many distinct and shared traditions. In the realms of governance, the management of the economy, elite cultures, and language. Through the 1,000 years between 700 and 1750, the character of the different regions did not grow in isolation. These regions felt the impact of larger pan-regional forces of integration without ever quite. Old and new religions. The 1,000 years of history that we are exploring witnessed major developments in religious traditions. People's belief in the divine was sometimes deeply personal, but more usually it was collective. Collective belief in a supernatural agency. Religion was often closely connected with the social and economic of these groups altered, so too did their beliefs. It was during this period that important changes occurred in what we call Hinduism today. These included the worship of new deities, the construction of temples by royalty, and the growing importance of Brahmanas, the priests, as dominant groups in society. Their knowledge of Sanskrit text earned the Brahmanas a lot of respect in society. Their dominant position was consolidated by the support of their patrons, new rulers, searching for prestige. One of the major developments of this period was the emergence of the idea of bhakti, of a loving personal deity that devotees could reach without the aid of priests or elaborate rituals. This was also the period when new religions appeared in the subcontinent. Merchants and migrants first brought the teachings of Holy Quran to India in the 7th century. Muslims regard the Quran as their holy book and accept the sovereignty of the one God, Allah, whose love, mercy, and bounty embrace all those who believe in Him, without regard to social background. Many rulers were patrons of Islam, and the ulama, learned theologians, and jurists. And like Hinduism, Islam was interpreted in a variety of ways by its followers. There were the Shia Muslims who believed that the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali, was the legitimate leader of the Muslim community, and the Sunni Muslims who accepted the authority of the early leaders called Khalifas of the community and the succeeding Khalifas. Now let's think about time and historical periods. Historians do not see time just as a passing of hours, days, or years, as a clock or a calendar. Time also reflects changes in social and economic organization, in the persistence and transformation of ideas and beliefs. The study of time is made somewhat easier by dividing the past into large segments, period, that possesses shared characteristics. In the middle of the 19th century, British historians divided the history of India into three periods: Hindu, Muslim, and British. This division was based on the idea that the religion of the rulers was the only important historical change, and that there were no other significant developments in the economy, society, or culture. Such a division also ignored the rich diversity of the subcontinent. Few historians follow this periodization today. Most look to economic and social factors to characterize the major elements of different moments of the past. The histories you read last year included a wide range of early societies: hunter gatherers, early farmers, people living in towns and villages, and early empires and kingdoms. The histories you will be studying this year are often described as medieval. You will find out more about the spread of peasant societies, the rise of regional and imperial state formations, sometimes at the cost of pastoral and forest people, the development of Hinduism and Islam as major religions, and the arrival of European trading companies. These 1,000 years of Indian history witnessed considerable change. After all, the 16th and 18th centuries were quite different from the 8th or the 11th. Therefore, describing the entire period as one historical unit is not without its problems. Moreover, the medieval period is often contrasted with the modern period. Modernity carries with it a sense of material progress and intellectual advancement, seems to suggest that the medieval period was lacking was not the case. During these 1,000 years, the societies of the subcontinent were transformed over, and economies in the several regions reached a level of prosperity that attracted the interest of European trading companies. I hope you liked the video. At times, the solutions of our problems in the present scenario have their answer in the past. Hope you clarified some of your doubts with this video. As we are talking about questions and answers, let's try to analyze what actually have you learned in this entire session. Let's go. Now let's see, who is a foreigner? It is used today to mean a person who is not an Indian. In the medieval period, a foreigner was any stranger who was not a part of that society or culture. In Hindi, the term Pardesi is used to describe such a person, and in Persian, Ajnabi. A city dweller regarded a forest dweller as a foreigner, but two peasants living in the same village were not foreigners to each other, though they belonged to different religions or caste backgrounds. Okay, let's see if the following statements are true or false. We do not find inscriptions for the period after 700 AD. It is false. Historians rely on coins, inscriptions, architecture, and textual records for information for the study of period from 700 to 1750. The Marathas asserted their political importance during this period. Very right. Marathas asserted their political importance during this period of 1,000 years. Forest dwellers were sometimes pushed out of their lands with the spread of agricultural settlements. Again correct. Forest dwellers were pushed out of their lands for the spread of agricultural settlements. Last question. Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban controlled Assam, Manipur and Kashmir. It is false. Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban, who ruled from 1266 to 1287, ruled a vast empire that stretched from Bengal in the east to Ghazni in Afghanistan in the west and included all of South India. Let's fill in the blanks. Archives are places where dash are kept. Archives are places where manuscripts are kept. Dash was a 14th century chronicle. Ziauddin Barani was a 14th century chronicler. Dash, 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 dash and dash were some of the new crops introduced in the subcontinent during this period. Potatoes, corn, chilies, tea and coffee were some of the new crops introduced in the subcontinent during this period. Hope you enjoyed this session. We'll be back with another video. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy and keep studying. Namaskar.